Israel is hoarding the Jordan River water, and now it's time to share that water. This is on The Conversation. Mark Zaitoun, Professor of Water Security, University of East Anglia. Muna Dajani, PhD, Environmental Policy Development, London School of Economics and Political Science. Two areas farmed by Israelis for more than 50 years have recently been returned to neighboring Jordan. The first, Al-Gamar, known as in Israel as Sofar, is located south of the Dead Sea in the Negev Desert, and the second, Al-Bakura Naharayim, is found at the fertile point where a major tributary joins the Jordan River. The association with water bodies is no coincidence. Neither land would have been occupied in the first place were it not for the water that the Israeli army and kibbutzim required to sustain the farms. The return of the lands was made possible by remarkable far-sighted clauses inserted in 1994 peace treaty between Jordan and Israel. Unfortunately, the parts of the same agreement concerning water could not be more myopic and ensure that one of the most arid countries in the world, Jordan, remains parched. Meanwhile, Palestinian farmers do not have enough water. This situation is locked in by a water agreement signed with Israel in 1995 as part of the Oslo II process. And as the water levels drop, tensions rise, and it gets worse with every scorching summer. As it controls the most water but needs it the least, Israel has a choice of to negotiate fairer agreements, but what must be challenging first is the thinking that led to the agreements in the first place, an economic doctrine which sees water as nothing more than a commodity to be sold or traded, and a political ideology that is fixated on holding on to as much water as possible. Those who need water most have the least. The effects of the commodification of water are crystal clear. At Al-Bakara, where the Yarmouk River flows westward and used to meet the Jordan River mainstream, which flows south between Jordan, the country, and on one side, and Israel and Palestine, the West Bank, on the other. But these days, almost every drop of the Yarmouk not used by farmers in Syria and Jordan is hoovered into a reservoir by farmers in Israel. The Jordan River itself has run dry ever since 1964, when Israel cornered sole use of Lake Tiberias, that's the Sea of Galilee, or Lake Kinneret, near the river's source. The Dead Sea at the river's endpoint has been dying ever since. Innovators in Israel have, in the meantime, perfected drip irrigation techniques, implemented impressive schemes which reuse wastewater, and built so many desalination plants that some commentators suggest it now has too much water. Meanwhile, Jordan is increasingly parched as it hosts millions of people who have fled wars in Kuwait, Iraq, and Syria. With no surface water of its own to speak of, Jordan resorts to desalination on its tiny coastline in Aqaba. It has been encouraged to pump the excessive flows from there to the neighboring Israeli city of Eilat. In exchange for fresh water, Israel is to pump back to Jordan from the contested Lake Tiberias, the Sea of Galilee, that is. The Palestinian residents of the West Bank actually have less water available now than when Oslo II was signed. In Gaza, desalination is too expensive for most, and with wastewater contaminating the groundwater, superbugs are creating a toxic biosphere of war. Israel does sell a small amount of fresh water to Gaza, but most of the water in channels from Tiberias 200 kilometers to the north stops at the border, tantalizingly in view of the Gazans, but out of their reach, reserved instead to grow potatoes that are exported to a rather wetter Europe. So you can blame ideology and not climate change. There is a tendency to blame climate change or refugees for these policy choices, probably because they cannot talk back. But those who created the mess are the ones who should and can change it. While the Israeli state does not need so much water, the distribution of control over the Jordan River and associated aquifers remains a mirror reflection of the relative power between the rival states. Israel controls more water than Jordan and the Palestinians combined, and more than double its entitlement when measured against the principles of the 1997 UN Watercourses Convention. Water that Israel promised Jordan back in 1994 peace treaty has still not materialized. In the West Bank, Israel's choice to hoard is expressed through the Oslo-created Israeli-Palestinian Joint Water Committee. Because the committee approves the water lines that every new settlement in the West Bank needs, but blocks projects for Palestinian villages, water becomes an effective tool of colonialism or even ethnic cleansing. Challenging the ideologies and rip up the agreements. It would be straightforward to invoke guidance from the UN Watercourses Convention if all that was required to end the Jordan River conflict was updating the agreements. The convention details how much water can be shared equitably and reasonably, and all the states involved signed up, bar Israel. At first, we must challenge the idea that water is a commodity that can be hoarded away or sold only to the highest bidder, but given the extent to which the practice is entrenched in political and economic systems of the region, evidence and argument are not enough on their own. Researchers can highlight the damage caused by water policy, and environmentalists may question the rationale of exporting desert-grown crops to Europe, and eventually the task is to replace the blinding ideologies with a strong sense of justice so that unfair water sharing comes to be seen as unacceptable as slavery. The required policy and legislation will flow naturally once this future is seen. It happened at Al-Bakara and Al-Gamra, and it can happen with the water. This is on The Conversation. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.